What's up? Did I get it? Did I nail it? No? Thanks, buddy. Hey guys, my name is Josh. I'm the teaching pastor here. Welcome to One Hope. If you are new here, one of the things that we love to do is making new friends. I love it. It's the best. And so if you're here and you're new, I just want you to know, I want to be friends with you, okay? And not in a weird, creepy way. Like in a very fun way. And so I realize I'm not helping myself. Anyway, if you would do us a favor, if you're new here, I would love it if you introduce yourself. One of the best ways you can do that is by filling out a Connect card. There's a card in the seat pocket in front of you. It says, "You belong." If you fill that out and drop it off in one of the boxes in the back, or at the You Belong table there, I'll get it, and I'll reach out to you this week. We'll grab coffee. It'll be super, super fun. Well, for the rest of you, you know that we are closing out our series that we're calling Heart for the House. It's called Heart for the House. This is the last week in that series, and we called it that for two reasons. The first one is that we wanted a weekly reminder that this is a house. A house is a place where you can belong. It houses a family. It's a place where you can make meaningful relationships that lead to lasting change in your life. It's a house. But the second reason is that kind of what Steve and I were sensing early in the summer was God's kind of desire for us to move into something more that he has for us. And so part of our goal with this series has been challenging, empowering, emboldening you to kind of take whatever that next step is for you, to take that next step into belonging here, into being a part of what we're doing here, so that we have an army ready to fight the battles that God has for us. We are all about expanding the kingdom here, and so we're trying to challenge and empower people to kind of take that next step into helping us do that. And so today we're talking about community. Community is a really important thing. So how many of you are introverts and want to leave now? You may. Just kidding, you can't. Well, I'll look at you funny like, oh, there they go. Anyway, we're talking about community today because I really believe this, that one of the most powerful tools that God has to change and transform us is community. It's belonging. And so every week, I've been trying to give you an empowering idea. Anytime that we want to take another step into something, there has to be a motive to do so. There has to be kind of a thought, an idea, a desire that kind of pushes you to take that next step. And so this morning, kind of our big idea that we're going to be talking about today, the empowering idea, is this, that belonging is powerful. Belonging is power. It is power. It is God's power to transform you. Is there anybody in here who has done something stupid because somebody told you to? Oh, all the college kids. Yeah. Oh, yes. I have several stories of that. Sometimes they include exploding things. So I just, I won't give you any ideas. So anyway, I think we've all had this moment in our lives in which we either we're pushed to do something, or we're a part of the pushing to get somebody to do something that they then did. And the reason that they did that is because they belonged to your group. You were leveraging your relationship to push them in the direction that you wanted to go. And we all know that works kind of negatively. The word that we use for that is peer pressure. It can be very powerful in your life. But I want to suggest to you this morning that the opposite is also true. That when you belong to a community that is passionately seeking Jesus, that is pushing constantly each other to pursue him more earnestly, to set aside more time to meet him, to make your whole life about pursuing Jesus, when you belong to that community, your life can change. In the same way that we can push you to do bad stuff, we can also push you to do good stuff. Belonging is power. I want to give you two examples of how this happens in Scripture. You're going to see this all over the Scriptures, but I want to give you two examples from one guy's life. His name's Peter. Peter, as you might know, was a fisherman, and he was known for being a little brash, He was always sticking his foot in his mouth. He's always saying the wrong thing. He's always doing the wrong thing. He's kind of an action first, think later kind of person. He's kind of a bull in a china shop. That's Peter. And at some point in Peter's life, Jesus steps into his life. And then 3 years later, Peter is leading this major expansion of the kingdom. He is overseeing the church and its missions overseas as the church expands and grows. There's a major transformation in the life of Peter. What happened? This is church, so you know the answer, right? Jesus. Yeah, right. That's what happened. Jesus had a meaningful relationship with the God of the universe, and in that relationship, he was transformed. He was pushed to be something more than he was. He was changed for the better. That's one example from Peter's life. Here's another one, though, because Peter wasn't perfect. And anytime you have a group of people, like a church or like a football team, or anytime you have any kind of group, there always comes this point where there's like tension in the group, where there are certain political factions within the group that kind of try and push and pull. And there's this one story in the book of Galatians where Peter has kind of given in to one group that was less about Jesus and more about Judaism. And so what happens is he's sitting there and he's showing honor to these people. He's encouraging these people. He's supporting these people. And Paul, who he had a relationship with, and you might know Paul because he's also very brash, but a little bit more thoughtful. Paul walks up to Peter and he says, "Bro, you're wrong. You're doing it wrong. You are pursuing and you are enabling people who are not about Jesus to have the power in this congregation. And when you're doing that, you're stepping on the other people that Jesus died for. You got to stop." And what does Peter do? He stops. Why? Because he had a meaningful relationship. It is in those meaningful relationships, they're the context for change, whether positive or negative, but they're the context for change in our life. Just like a plant needs water and soil and sunlight to grow, so the human soul needs meaningful relationships. It needs to belong in order to grow. Belonging is power. It is power. It is powerful in your life. It's one of God's most powerful tools that he uses to shape and form and direct and transform and change your heart. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. The power of belonging. And so here's how today's kind of going to work. We're going to start with a story from the Bible. I want to show you just how powerful belonging is. Because I can sit here and say it, but I want to show you because it is so much more than you think it is. So we're going to start with how powerful belonging is. And then I want to move to how belonging works here at this church. If it's that powerful, what are we doing to kind of create an environment in which you can belong? We're going to talk about how belonging works here at One Hope. And I want to finish with by talking about what it looks like. I want to kind of paint a picture for what it could look like if you belong here at this church. So that being said, let's jump into the passage. We're going to be in John chapter 20. John chapter 20, and we're going to start in verse 24. One thing you got to know before we jump into this is that Jesus, at this point in the story, has just died and resurrected. He accomplished the greatest thing that has ever happened in human history. Jesus has just done it. And when he came back to life, he appeared to several people. One of them was a group of women. Then he appeared to the disciples. Actually, he appeared to all the disciples but one. And this story is about that one guy. This is verse 24. Now Thomas, one of the 12, he's one of the 12 disciples, called the twin. Why do you think he was called the twin? He had a twin. Called the twin. Sometimes you look at the Bible and you're like, why does it say that? And it's like, well, because there's an obvious answer. It's not hard to understand. Anyway, he's called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. He missed out. Can you just like kind of put yourself in Thomas' position for a second? You're hanging out with the disciples. Jesus has just died. Your leader has just died. And he says to himself, I got to go potty. So I'll see you guys in a second. He walks out. Jesus comes back. And then he comes back and he's like, hey, what's up? What happened? He missed the biggest thing. Couldn't you hold it, Thomas? I just would have serious FOMO. Any FOMO people here? That'd be bad. Okay, so he's with them. He wasn't with them when Jesus came. I want you to see what happens here because this is really powerful. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side where Jesus was stabbed with a spear. If you read the crucifixion story, unless I place my hand into his side, I will never believe. Think about that. I will never believe. Here is this community that has been formed by Jesus, that has grown and matured because of their relationship with Jesus. They have a bond together because of their relationship with Jesus. Jesus died, and they are sorrowful together. They're in mourning together. They are crying on each other's shoulders. And then Jesus comes back. The greatest thing that could happen in their lives, Jesus has raised from the dead, and they're united in this hope for the future, that their dreams did not die when Jesus died, but now they're even more powerfully coming true, that the hope that they had for the future is now even more able to be accomplished because of his resurrection. They're united in this thing, and then Thomas says, I will never believe that. This is kind of intense, and I need you to see how deep the problem is here. Because in any human group, and this is true for churches, but it's also true for any kind of group, any team, any political group, any kind of group of humans, as humans, we're always looking for reasons why new people don't belong, or why somebody in our group doesn't belong to our group. Our sort of mindset is kind of prove to us that you belong here, and if you mess up, then you're out. And a lot of churches kind of have this, I call it a doubt you're out mentality. If you have doubt, then we need to get rid of you. If you're skeptical, if you have questions, particularly questions that are difficult for the leaders, if you then you'll be labeled a troublemaker. If you are kind of talking to people about your doubts, then what we do out of fear in any group is we try to kick you out, to get rid of you. If you doubt, then you're out. That's the normal way that human groups happen. I think that there are many people in this room who that has happened to. Maybe not in a church context, but maybe in a friendship group, like as you're growing up, maybe in high school, maybe in college. Maybe you've been a part of a group in which at some point you somehow broke the unwritten rules of the group and then you were kicked out. Most human groups have an attitude of prove to me that you belong, and if you don't, you're out. If you doubt, you are out. Thomas here expresses doubt about the fundamental thing about Christianity, that Jesus rose from the dead. He says the thing that has shaped the church, that has caused it to grow, that has caused it to still be around 2,000 years later, the core thing that unites Catholics and Protestants, the core thing that unites all denominations, is that we believe that Jesus died and rose again. And Thomas is standing here saying, nope, I will never believe that. I will never believe that. You have to see how big this problem is for Thomas. Because if he had said that in modern day church, he'd be out. I'm never going to believe that. Okay, well, this place isn't for you. That would be the normal reaction. But the disciples have a completely different reaction. I want to show you this. Verse 26, he says, 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. I want you to see this. 8 days later, he's still with them. They didn't have an attitude of, if you express doubt in the fundamental thing that unites us, then we need to kick you out. No, they said you need to stay. You need to stay here. 8 days later, he's still in the group. He didn't get kicked out, and it's such a good thing that he didn't get kicked out, because the power of belonging is about to be revealed. Thomas's life is about to change. Jesus appears into the room. It says this: although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." He just appears. It's like, boom, Jesus. Hey, guys. Or maybe it was more like Kathleen. He was like, "What's up?" Anyway, that'd be fun if Jesus was here today. Anyway, it says this: then he said to Thomas, he looks at Thomas, and he says, "Here, put your finger here. See my hands. And put out your hand and place it into my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." And Thomas' answer is amazing. He doesn't need to do it. He doesn't put his hands on his hands. He doesn't put his hand on his side. Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." I want you to see that Thomas's life was completely changed by an encounter with Jesus. How many of you have that's happened in your life? Your life has been completely changed because you met Jesus. That's the fundamental way that we have our hearts transformed, is that we have an experience with the God of the universe. But here's the power of belonging. The disciples said, if you doubt, that's okay, you stay. And is in the staying, it was in the holding of Thomas, it was in the bond that he had built with the other disciples that he chose to be around when God came back. I want you to see this, that belonging is powerful because when you belong to a group of people who are passionately seeking Jesus, when you have built that bond with them, when you're hanging out with the people who are pursuing God in your life, what happens is you have a greater chance of being there when God shows up. It is engaging in community, that a community that is pursuing Jesus, engaging in that kind of community that increases your chances of having an encounter with the God of the universe. This is the power of belonging. It builds a bond. And I don't mean a bond like oh, that's so nice bond. I mean a bond like chemically, like chemistry, right? Like, so you think back to high school, or some of you in college, I don't know. Here's what happens in atoms. They share electrons, and they have these electrons are going to kind of go, well, anyway, you get the point. And what happens is the stronger that bond is, the more energy it requires for you to break the bond. The stronger the bond is, the harder it is to break. When you belong to a group, you bond with those people. You build a bond with those people. And it's that bond that keeps you there. And this can be really bad, because I think we've all had, a bad friend or a bad group of friends that were kind of pushing us the wrong way. They're dragging us through that bond. But when you belong to a community that is passionately seeking and pursuing the God of the universe, that bond holds you in that community. And here's the thing that's so beautiful about God, is that he regularly reveals himself to his people. And if you're bonded to those people, you'll be there when that happens. Belonging is power. Belonging is power. And it's one of the biggest tools that God uses to change you. Have you ever been transformed outside the context of community? The answer is no. I'll just answer that for you real quick. The answer is no. Every meaningful moment in your life in which you grew, in which you were transformed, happened in the context of a relationship. And maybe that relationship was just with the God of the universe, and it was just you and him. Or maybe it was in the context of a group of people that you were with, and you were talking about your faith. Have you ever heard somebody say, man, I was reading whatever the other day, and Jesus said this, and it nourished my heart. Have you ever had that moment where you're like, I've never heard that before? That's so exciting. That changes the way that I see the world. It's in the context of relationship that we grow and are changed. Belonging is power. It was power for Thomas. I want you to see this. Because Thomas belonged before he believed, his heart was transformed. I'm going to say that again. Before Thomas belonged, before he believed, his heart was transformed. One of the things that I love to say over and over, and I need to say it again, is that this church is open to everybody. Regardless of what you believe, it is open to you regardless of what's going on in your life. These seats are open for every person in this community. Now, here's the thing. In leadership or membership, the door is closed a little bit more because we want people who are leading this church to exhibit a certain kind of life that's very biblical. But these seats are open to everybody because we believe this, that belonging is power. And when you come and engage in this community, especially on a Sunday morning, when everybody is singing their lungs out to Jesus, you got the hands raised. I looked out, I was sitting over here just 10 minutes ago, and I looked out, and there's so many people just passionately worshiping Jesus. It is hard to resist that. If you come here and you don't believe in God, your whole heart, and the question on your mind is like, what is going on here? These seats are open to everybody because belonging is power. And the longer that we can hold somebody, the greater the chance that they'll meet Jesus. Belonging is power. I want to tell you the end of this story, because we know that Thomas's heart was transformed by Jesus because of the power of belonging, but you don't know the end of it. It's not recorded in Scripture. Tradition tells us that in 52 AD, Thomas went on a mission. He was sent, went to southern India. And in India, he converted 7 big families, founded 7 churches, and to this day, 2,000 years later, there is a community in India that traces its roots back to Thomas's mission. There's still Christians on the southern tip of India today because of what Thomas did. You have to see how powerful belonging is. Because he was held, because he had a bond with people who were pursuing Jesus, his life was changed. But that's not where the change stopped. The change continued to happen across the world. The kingdom was expanded because he was held. Because he belonged before he believed, he was able to expand the kingdom in the far reaches of the world at that time. Belonging is power. It is power. Do you believe that? Have you experienced the power of belonging to the God of the universe? Or have you experienced the power of belonging to a community of believers who are pursuing Jesus? Have you felt that bond, that pushing towards Jesus? If you haven't, we have a place for you. I want to switch now from talking about why we have life groups, why we do community, why we want to belong here. And the reason for that is it's power. Belonging is power. And I want to talk about how it is that we have structured this church so that you can belong. Remember, belonging is power. Because of that, we've changed the way that we do things so that you can have a place to belong here. And the answer to that question is life groups. Life groups. Now, if I was going to introduce life groups to you, I would show you our values for life groups. Oh my goodness, there they are. Magic. Here's what we do for life groups. If you were involved in a life group, this is what you're going to experience: meaningful relationships, movement, and mission. And this is very much based off of Thomas. Thomas had a meaningful relationship that caused movement, growth, transformation in his heart, and then he was inspired to go on mission. We've kind of based our life groups off of this thing. We want you to have meaningful relationships because in the process of being held and pushed by people who are pursuing Jesus, I think you'll experience Jesus. And whether you experience him in a discussion or you read a verse for the first time in that group in a way that maybe you've never seen it before, you're going to experience the power of Jesus in that moment, and your heart is going to be transformed. And we also value mission. Let me talk about those things kind of individually. It turns out there is, I always think this is funny, there are people who study weird things, right? There's like people who like specialize in like this little tiny beetle thing, you know. In the same way, there are people who specialize in friendships, in relationships. And there's actually kind of a science to how meaningful relationships are built. Every meaningful relationship requires 5 things, okay? They're not going to be on the screen, so if you want to write these down, get your phone out or something, I don't know. 5 things. The first one is positive interactions. Have you ever decided to go on a second date with somebody who had a terrible first date with? No. Have you ever wanted to hang out with somebody who, I don't know, who smelled bad? No, you don't. Here's the thing. You have to have positive interactions in order to motivate you to want to be around that person. Every meaningful relationship requires positive interactions. Now, that doesn't mean like happy, joy, fun celebration. It can also mean, hey, we went on a mission trip together. We saw the poverty, the need. We helped together to fulfill that need. That was a positive experience. So when you hear the word positive, don't necessarily think, wee. You can also think, yes, that's good. That's my response after a Taco Bell trip. Anyway, meaningful relationships require positive interactions. Here's the second one. They require consistency. Consistency. Have you ever stopped and thought, I think I'm closer to my coworkers than I am my family? Here's the thing. You have way more consistency in your relationship with your coworkers than you do with your parents. Very likely. You have more consistency at the people who you work with than the people who birthed you. That hurts because I have kids. But anyway, here's the thing. Consistency builds relationships in a way that nothing else does. When you see people every day, and it's a positive interaction every day, that means that your relationship is probably going to grow. Positive interactions, consistency. Here's the third one, vulnerability. Vulnerability. We've all had that moment in which we shared something that was deeply important to us, and we were accepted and loved, and we were encouraged, and we were held in that moment. Whenever that happens, you grow closer to the people in that group. You just do. It's just something about how the human heart is wired. Positivity, consistency, vulnerability. Here's another one. The need fulfillment cycle. This is the scientists call it the need fulfillment cycle. You know this because it's like, I forgot my lunch, and then your coworker's like, "Oh, I'll take you to lunch, and I'll just buy your lunch." You had a need, and they fulfilled it. Maybe you've had a greater need that you've had fulfilled. Actually, it was a year ago. We were on vacation, and we were coming back from vacation in northern Michigan. And I'm driving in this car, and I like to leave. I have a strategy about driving with an army of children. The best way to do it is when they're sleeping, right? Because then they're not, "Hey, when are we going to get home? Hey, I've got to pee. Hey, blah, blah." If they're asleep, they can't talk. Just saying. So we're driving. I remember we're on 75. We'd just gotten into Detroit, and I popped a tire. I was like, I hate that. So we pulled over, and we had bought this van like 3 years before, never popped a tire. Get all the stuff out, open the compartment for the tire, no spare. 5 sleeping kids, no tire. So I do what you would normally do if you're in a situation in which you're kind of overwhelmed, and I called my dad. Dad, save me. And he said, "Hey, that's fun. I'm in Chicago." Ugh. So he said, "You know what you should do? If you get an Uber," he said, "get an Uber and then have somebody come tow your thing." So I downloaded Uber, and then I was like trying to get a hold of guys, and they're like, "Oh, I don't have room for 7 people." And I'm like, "Well, that makes sense." So in the context of this, I want you to just kind of put yourself in my position here, because I'm the dad. I'm in charge of the safety of my kids. They're pulled over to the side of the road right now, which is not the best place for them to be. We've been here for an hour. I'm a little overwhelmed. I'm stressed out. My dad can't help me. And on top of that, it's like now 12:30 a.m. Who am I going to call? My wife says, let's call Sam, her friend, who goes to this church, who has been so wonderful to our family. So we call her. It's 12:30. She gets out of bed, gets in the car, drives an hour and a half, picks us all up, and takes us all home. And I got to say, that's still, to this day, I think it's one of the most meaningful things anybody's ever done for me. Because in a moment when I couldn't provide for my family, somebody else came and rescued me. It's powerful. Belonging is powerful. I had a need that went fulfilled, and because of that, I love them. Nope, you can do whatever you want to me. I love you because of what you did. That was so nice. Belonging is powerful. So the need fulfillment cycle. So we've talked about positivity, consistency, vulnerability, the need fulfillment cycle. The last one's a little hard to understand. It's called claiming activities. Let me give you an example of a claiming activity. Tom, you're a good friend of mine. I love you, buddy. I claimed him. He's my friend. I claimed him. So sometimes you do this with your kids. You are my daughter. I love you. That's a claiming activity. Some of you here are wearing a One Hope t-shirt. Thank you. You've claimed us. You're wearing our symbol on your person. You've claimed us. Think about somebody who is lonely, who maybe feels like they've never belonged. Here's why you feel that way. You feel that nobody has chosen you. Like nobody picked you. What a claiming activity does is it says, you are wanted. You belong here. We want you to be in this friend group. We want you to be a part of our life group. We want you to be in this church. That's a claiming activity. And when you're in the presence of somebody who is constantly claiming you, man, that's nice. We are friends. Yes. And here's the thing, like you can go through your life and make mistakes, and in the context of that relationship, especially if you've made a mistake and they still claim you, they forgive you, they claim you, that is powerful. That builds a bond between your souls. Those are the 5 things that every life group, I hope, has. We're constantly giving training to our life group leaders to make sure that meaningful relationships can be built. If you engage in a life group here, what I want you to experience is those 5 things: positive interactions, consistency, vulnerability, the need fulfillment cycle, and that last one, claiming activities. That's what we hope for you. Why? Because when you belong, belonging is power, and when you belong, it will lead to movement. If you belong to a group that is pursuing Jesus, they'll push you. Sometimes they'll kick you. Sometimes they'll lovingly encourage you to pursue Jesus, to grow, to move, to be transformed in the presence of God. And as a pastor, that's my job. I'm here to help everybody grow more into what Christ has for them. And one of the ways that we do that is by having life groups. Because in the context of meaningful relationships, you will experience movement, but it never stops at movement. Never stops there. We also do mission. So around here, one of the things that we do is love no matter what. And so once a month, we try to find a undervalued, underserved community and love on them in a creative, crazy, splashy way so that we can inspire other people to love on this community as well. We have an activity for that once a month. The challenge in the fall for life groups is to once a month engage in the love no matter what activity that we're doing together. We want you to go on mission together. Because here's the thing. When you're changed by Jesus, truly changed by Jesus, when you've experienced the hope and the power that is in his presence, when your heart is filled with the joy and love of the God of the universe, you overflow. It's not just halfway filling, like, oh, that was nice. It's all the way filling. You overflow with the good news of Jesus Christ. And so we want to provide a context for you to go on mission. And part of the way we do that is love no matter what. So our hope is that all of our life groups will have meaningful relationships that leads to movement in your soul, that leads to mission. Because when we do that, then the kingdom of God is expanded. That is what we are seeking for. That's kind of how we are structured for belonging. You can belong to a life group, and that's what a life group looks like. Now I want to kind of transition to what that could look like for you. Because I get this question a lot, because we have a lot of people who come here who didn't grow up in church. And so you come to church and we're like, life groups. And you're like, is that a cult? You know, it's kind of like, oh, this is weird. You're going to go to somebody's house? Ew. That's the introverts. Anyway. So here's what I got to tell you what a life group is. A life group is a group of people that meets once a week or every other week at somebody's house. There's usually a leader, there's always a leader of the life group, and it's their job to create that kind of environment, to create the positive interactions, to create the consistency and the vulnerability. It's their job to kind of oversee all of those things. And so there's a leader there, and what we do is we kind of meet and we hang out, and then we have a discussion. I type up the questions. There's usually 5 questions that you kind of walk through together. They're based on the sermon the week before. And this year, a new thing we're doing is we're going to post the discussion questions to our website. If you have ever been in a group where you said, what are you getting out of this verse? And then the response was this. Here's the answer. Have your people read the discussions before you come so that they have answers ready, so that you've already went through the discussion questions so that you can provide a good and meaningful discussion. So we'll post those discussion questions to our website. They're available to anybody. Then you'll go to the group. You'll do the discussion questions. It'll be super fun. Now, here's the thing that I need to say. Do you know what the number one reason people don't get involved in a life group is? Too busy. Too busy. So I understand that because I have 5 kids. I'm too busy for a life group. I get it. So here's what we're doing. We're moving to a different kind of model. We're going to do 2 rounds of life group a year, 2 rounds for 10 weeks each. This is a very low commitment. Now, you don't have to stop at 10 weeks. If you like your group can continue to meet, but the initial commitment is 10 weeks. 10 weeks. That's all you got to do. You're not signing up for a year. You're not signing up for a season. You're signing up for 10 weeks. 10 weeks. And what's going to happen is those 10 weeks are going to be very focused focused on building the bonds within that relationship so that you can feel like you have a place that you belong. So here's how you sign up for a life group. If you believe that belonging is power, if you want to be transformed by Jesus, if you're pursuing him, if you feel lonely, if you feel like you just want to take that next step to belong more in this community, here's how you can do that. You can sign up for a life group. There are papers out on the sign-up sheets, out on the welcome table. You can sign up, fill that out there. You can also email us, info@onehopetoledo.org, and we'll reach out to you. We'll help you get involved. Or you can text Life Group to 419-318-3442, and I'll reach out to you, and we'll help you get plugged in. One of the things that we do that's a little bit different maybe than other churches is you don't sign up for a group. We help you find the right group for you because we want you to find a good fit. We don't want you to be 18 and then get into the 65-year-old group or vice versa. It's just a little weird. So we help you get signed up. So all you got to do, the only thing you got to do is sign up, and we'll help you get involved. I'm going to bring the band up, but as they're coming up, I want to close with this story about how powerful I've seen belonging be. Before I was a pastor, I was a physical therapist assistant. I worked in a nursing home, and I worked in the best nursing home because it specialized in low-income clients. A lot of nursing homes try to avoid picking up low-income clients because they don't take as good care of themselves, and so it screws up their numbers. This nursing home specialized in that, and I got to interact with the fun people, the craziest people, who often struggled with mental health, who often had major struggles. They were the kind of people that don't belong anywhere. And I don't know if you know anything about nursing homes, but it's very easy for someone to get depressed because you're sick. Maybe the worst thing that's ever happened to you has just happened to you, and now you're in this place where you're supposed to work out with a guy named Josh every day. That's like weird. Why would I do that? I'm sad, So I had this one patient, and she was in there because she had these terrible burns, and I remember her because nobody wanted to work with her. She did not belong. And so what happened in the team that I belonged to is that whenever nobody wanted to work with somebody, they always said, "Josh, you're working with them." Thanks, guys. So this person, she had a speech impediment, and when she talked, she would just like spit, and it wasn't like oh, there's a little thing there. It was like a river coming out of her mouth. And so people, they're just kind of like, nah. So she was very much rejected. She was very much on the outside. She even in the place where most people are on the outside. And I worked with her, and I got to tell you, I fell in love with her because she, number one, was super crazy and fun. Those are the fun ones. And she made me laugh like every day. And here's the thing, I fell in love with her, and I started to, I worked with her, and I tried to get her motivated, but there came this point in which, man, she was just so depressed. She refused to take her medicine. She refused to get out of bed. So they said, "Josh, you got to go in and you got to motivate her." So, I walked in. I remember walking into this room, and you can smell before you walk in there. And I just sat down next to the bed, and I remember I grabbed her hand, and I said, "Look, I know that this is hard for you. I know that you feel sorrowful. I know that the life and the energy has just been zapped out of you by what's happened. But we've got to get you better, and we can do this." And she did not want to, but I made her. So I basically lifted her out of bed, put her in her chair, and took her to therapy. But I don't share this story because it's like woo-woo Josh. I share this story because I want you to know how powerful belonging can be in your life. That when you're in the worst possible space, it is the people who love you, who surround you and lift you up. Belonging is power. And what we do here is structure you to belong. We want to structure this place so that you can belong. Just like plants need soil, so you need belonging, and this church is made for you to belong. All you have to do is sign up, and you can do that after the service. Let's stand. I'm gonna pray real quick. Father God, I thank you that you're a good God, that you're a God of belonging, that you yourself exist in Trinity, in community, and that you've structured and made our souls to belong. And Father, I just ask that in this next few moments as we worship you, would you remind us of the love you have for us? Would you remind us that we belong to you? Would you transform us in the midst of that?